ni Kristo.
Don't underestimate
the power
of a single
Conversation.
it could change your whole life.
INCRadio Chat Line.
conversations that matter.
Back to Chat Line, where we have conversations that matter. I'm Melvi Tamayo, and I will be your host this evening. Thanks for tuning in, and I am happy to be back. I know it's been a while, but this is a wonderful topic we're going to have tonight. So, those of you who are tuning in live, please share your comments as well as your insights, because we will be talking about all about giving out too much information, or TMI, or oversharing. Is this good or is this bad? Now I have my friends here with me, of course. I'm not alone. So I have Arnie and Tony with me tonight. So Arnie, do you think oversharing is bad?
I think it all depends on what you're sharing, because sometimes people don't give enough information and it doesn't help. But then sometimes people do give too much information and it's one of those like, yeah, I don't want to hear it.
Have you ever experienced where you meet, let's say, somebody for the very first time and they are so thrilled, they're so excited to meet you. And all of a sudden, as you're having the conversation, they're now dominating the conversation. And then eventually you're like, okay, I think this is getting overwhelming for me because I don't want to hear every single detail when especially it's your first time meeting that person. So what do you guys think would be a good conversation starter?
I think just
no.
like where you're from, what you like to do, just general stuff. I don't think you should get into anything personal yet.
Right. I think I agree with that because, you wouldn't want to be sharing what you have in your closet if you met the person for the very first time, right? So something like that. How about you, Tony? What's your comment?
I made a face, and I don't think everybody saw that, but I made a face because when I meet people, I always ask so many questions. I will ask you questions about everything about your life. So for me, I guess it's not the sharing. I don't know if I'm being intrusive or yeah. So if I've asked like too personal questions, I'm sorry in advance. But that's my conversation starter. Usually it's like, oh, not just like where you grew up, but like if you like give me like tidbits about yourself, I'll follow up. Like people are scared of my follow-ups, I think. But they still answer. So I guess it works.
Yes, it does, because you know why? I'm also the same way. I would ask questions, but not to a point where it becomes too personal, where they would be uncomfortable. But it's one of those things where if you do a follow-up question, especially if both of you have, let's say, common things that you share, or maybe even find out you're basically very similar with each other, and therefore the conversation just keeps going. But to a point where you can tell between either verbal or non-verbal cues, right? To where one of you starts feeling something, where it becomes now uncomfortable all of a sudden, then that's the cue that we need to reassess what we're saying. Now, when it comes to oversharing, I know that some people, or some of us, can get carried away. Now, in social media, for example, right? What do you guys like to share? And do you think you overshare in your own? I think all of us have our own social media accounts, right? So what do you guys usually share on your social media?
I share my food, like the things I cook or the things I'm having for dinner. Only because when I see other people's posts of food, it gives me an idea of what I could make for dinner or what I can do to tweak it so that I like that dish. So I like to share food, and I like to share places that I visit. Only because, I have friends and family who don't have the opportunity to go places. And so they're always, share your pictures so that they can see. So even if they've never been to Montana, at least they can kind of see what it's like from whatever I'm sharing. So,
I
but
do
so I
love
don't try
that.
to share.
Yes. Do you love people who share their passion either when it comes to cooking or the food? You can't go wrong with food. I'm sorry, but I love food. So I love getting recipes, screenshots after screenshots. So recipes when it comes to food, and I'll try it and then tweak it. But yes, I also love the fact that when people share their travels, like the beautiful sceneries they've gone to or places that they've visited, for example, and I haven't gone there, then it makes me happy to be able to see it, even though it's just in photos, because I feel like, with me just looking at a photo and me imagining myself there is already more than enough for me to be inspired to also travel more. How about you, Tony? Do you have a social media account?
I do. I'm on Instagram and Facebook. I'm tougher to find on Instagram just because I don't include my name there, just like personal reasons, which I'm sure we'll get into later in terms of like privacy and everything like that. But stuff that I post is I'm not a try hard like inspo person. I just share my feelings a lot. I don't know if that's oversharing, but sometimes I get inspired by random things. Like I'll get inspired by nature that I'll see outside, and then it makes me think deeply about things. That's stuff that I enjoy posting. And before I used to be shy about it and just like, do people think this is weird? Like, are people like resonating with this? But then I just stopped caring. I was like, I'm gonna post it because it's my social media.
Yeah.
And when you share things that's inspiring, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think sometimes it kind of gets weird when people, they're not sharing what they're inspired by, but they're sharing their feelings kind of in a way where maybe it's too much. Like sometimes I understand when people have bad days and they can just say, oh, it's not a good day. But when they go into details of how awful their day was or how awful they're feeling, I sometimes worry because I don't know why they're posting those things. And, I feel like I have to reach out to them just to see how they're doing and stuff. But I think sharing like that, I think that's too much.
Do you see that a lot, Arnie?
I
Is that
do. I do.
Mm.
And because like normally when people post, they it's like they're bragging, right? They're posting all the good stuff that happens. But then you have some people where all they're posting is all the bad stuff that's happening to them.
Yes, and I've seen that too, where when you're scrolling on social media, even if it's someone that I don't know, it does make me feel uncomfortable. And I do worry about the person or the people who do this, because it's one of those where, in as much as possible, you can just keep it privately to yourself. You don't have to overshare every emotions that you have every single day, especially media. I don't know what people get out of it. I do empathize with them when it comes to their emotions. However, sometimes it boggles me when they do so much to where now you're seeing some degrading comments or negative comments, and hopefully that they're not getting affected by those comments that they're seeing on their posts themselves. Now, do you guys know anybody who overshare, maybe somebody that you've met, or maybe your friends or family members who love to, maybe you think they overshare too much to a point where, okay, we need to either slow down or be mindful of your post, because you know you don't want to be either, for example, a victim, right? Or it's one of those where I've known people who ended up, let's say, an example would be they got robbed because they posted, or they keep posting where they're going every single day, especially when they go out on vacation for a long period of time. And so you'll never know, or we'll never know, people who are out there maybe keeping tabs on us, for example. I mean, even celebrities go through these problems, so everybody's really not exempt when it comes to being, when you have so much exposure that in the end you might be a target yourself. So do you guys know anyone, or have you experienced this in your own personal lives by any chance?
I personally have not, only because now I've learned when I post my vacation pictures, I post it when I get back. And because sometimes when I post it when I'm there, they're like, oh, get me this, get me that, right? So I'm like, just to avoid it, I'm just going to post everything after the fact. And so even if people come try to rob my house, first of all, there's nothing they're going to steal because I have nothing in my house, but I'll already be home. So they won't be able to take anything.
No, but that's true though. That's a good point that you just made, because I do know some people. I do it myself. Sometimes I get carried away by posting, like, the 24-hour rule or something like that on your story. And then I think about it. I said, wait a minute. Oh, I want to delete that. Let me delete that real quick. Or sometimes I just do it for the sake of doing it without really thinking. But I only do it if I know that I'm going to be home. But if I'm away, then I stop doing it. So I would just post it afterwards. But even now, I hardly post anything, even on my social media, unlike before, because I just don't have time. How about you, Tony? Any experiences? Or do you know of anyone who likes to overshare?
Yeah, no one that I'm necessarily super close to, but I've seen it. Like, sometimes you still have those connections from, way, way before, and you're just like, oh, I don't know if that's like wise to detail to that level, right? Lots of the digital footprint now is kind of crazy. So it's always good to be wary about how much of yourself you're really putting out there, because you might think that stuff can get deleted, but it's still, the data is still somewhere out there. So just, I would just be mindful. Like to Arnie's point, I try to do that too. Vacation, like I don't post it, not just for your house, like for people not knowing that you're home, but even they could, people stalk, like that is a thing. Like you don't want people to just find you because you shared your location for, oh, we're at the fountain and we're doing this thing, and it's like, and that's not to like incite panic in people. Like you can do that stuff, but just be wise, I guess. I just be wise and careful, because
See, I don't have I don't worry about that because no one's stalking me, and
I
sometimes
don't
I
know,
post.
Arnie. It
No one's
might be
no one's even looking at my social
blonde-eyed,
media.
or blonde
How would
hair.
you know? How would you know that?
Hey, if blue-eyed blonde hair was stalking me, that's not called stalking. That's called come on over and let's have a chat, okay? I wouldn't be offended if blue-eyed
That's
blonde
the
hair was
exception
stalking
to the rule, huh?
me. Yes.
So if you turn around and if it's that description, you're like, oh yeah, sure, welcome aboard.
Yep, exactly. Exactly.
Well, also because mine is not on private, so that's also why I'm careful. Because I know some other people, like there's social media is like privated, but mine's public. So I'm very particular about how I post mine. That's another.
I have to set mine now in private because I've had my experiences that when it was public before, I got hacked a few times. And they've used my photos, by the way. So just be aware
Oh
of what you share. Yeah, they've used my photos and pretend to be someone else somewhere in another state.
I should rethink.
So be careful out there with what you post and who you talk to, because you'll never know who's going to be aiming at you, or who's got other, maybe bad intentions. So beware of that. And you know, I don't really know why people do it, to be honest, but why do you guys think that some people just love to overshare from their life, their personal lives, to even their relationships? Do you think maybe it has to do something with having validation, perhaps, or maybe give comfort to have all the likes in the world when you post it on social media?
I mean, I think people have different reasons. I know with some people, like some of my friends, they like to share because they want to make it seem like their life is great, even though maybe it really isn't. And like I said, for me, when good things happen in my life, it's something I'm proud of, it's something that I enjoy, I like to share that, and it's not to make it where I think, oh, I'm sharing this because I'm extremely happy and I don't care how else everybody's feeling, kind of a thing, right? I just like to share good things because I think it's easier to share good things than the bad stuff. Because like when people post, like, let's say just relationships and how great their relationship is and all that stuff, right? And then when things don't work out, then they post it. And then all of a sudden, this person that they love so much is now like the worst person in the whole world. You know what I mean? And so, like I said, if I was in a relationship, I don't think I would be posting everything about the relationship, but I'd be posting the good stuff. But if things didn't work out, I don't think that's something I would be posting. But that's just me. So I don't know.
What would you, or how would you categorize something that's oversharing? Would that be like considering, I don't know, posting 24/7 or every little detail about your life? I think that would be it, right? What do you guys think?
I mean, for me, if they post 24/7, I don't think that's oversharing. I think what's oversharing is the information that they're sharing. So like if they were to post, what they're eating every hour on the hour, I don't think that's anything bad. Or if they post a joke every hour on the hour, I don't think that's bad. But I think once they start posting, where they get so emotional, like every hour, I think that's oversharing or giving information that people don't need to know. You know what I'm saying? Where it should be like a private conversation they're having with somebody, or it should be something that is just between them and another person. I don't think that should be shared.
Thanks for saying that.
No, because even if they're
No,
only
it's
sharing
true.
it once a day, or once in a while, but then if that's what they're posting, which should not be shared with everybody else, then I just think that's too much.
Yeah, one common thing that I've kind of seen with some of the features of social media is like which is unfortunate because it sometimes you don't willingly want to know that information, like when you can see what people are liking, and like everyone's like free to like their own stuff. But I remember Instagram had this feature a little while back where you could put notes on certain things. So sometimes it felt like when people would put notes on certain things, it kind of felt like, in Tagalog they call it patamaan. I don't know how you would translate that in English. It's kind of like you're trying to, it's like passive aggressiveness.
Yeah.
And it's like that becomes a whole other thing, which speaks to what Arnie is saying, which is like if there's something that's like going on, like you should take it offline.
It's like
Like
subtle
don't,
attacks.
yeah,
It's like
don't
subtle
don't let that be a
word.
thing. Yeah. Like
Oh yeah, you
like
know what?
don't.
I've seen that where let's say two people just go back and forth about that. They won't say exactly who it is, or they won't be
Mhm.
specific about the person, but you can already tell it's pertaining to someone. And then they
Yeah.
start sharing why or how it happened, and the list goes on. But yeah, well, if that's between two individuals, then I say do your best to just, settle it yourselves and not have to expose it in the world, because I would feel bad if that was me, and being, I mean, you can tell if you're the target, especially if you've had either a tiff or a dispute with someone, and then all of a
I don't know.
sudden
I'm an overthinker. I'm Melvia. I'm an
I can
overthinker. So
be overthinker too.
you could post something and I'll read it and I'll be like, is that about me? Like, is she mad at me? That's me.
Well,
That's
it doesn't
totally me.
have to be about us, but you know how you feel like, wait a minute, that really hits me right now. Why am I seeing this? And
Yeah.
you it just gives you that feeling that, well, I don't want to hear it, but it's the truth sometimes. So that's social media.
I'm
Yeah.
petty. I do that.
Oh,
If somebody's getting on my nerves and I know it's something they wanted or something they were somewhere they wanted to go, I will be petty and post it. But I'm not going to target them. I'm just going to say, oh, look where I'm at, and see if they see it. But yeah. And for me, I think that the reason I don't like to overshare is because some people are just really mean when they make comments. So even if, or how they make comments could be interpreted the wrong way, right? Like let's say I posted a place and someone always comments, oh, been there, done that. I'm like, okay, I really don't care if you've been there and done that. I'm just sharing this is where I'm at. You know what I'm saying?
no, really, yeah. I'm happy when somebody posts their travel photos or how they feel about their trips. I'm happy for them, whether I've been there or not. That's just me. But yeah, you're right. I have had some of those comments too, and it hurts. Like, why do you have to say, why do you have to say that out loud without saying it out loud, right? Okay, so that's for social media. But what about in social settings? What would you consider oversharing? Especially, when I know that we've covered this at the very beginning of our conversation, but it, has it have you ever experienced getting overwhelmed in a conversation where it feels like the person is just sharing too much information that you don't need to know?
Depends on your audience, I think. Depends on your relationship with the person.
Even let's
Uh,
say with family and friends, have you guys encountered that where you sit there and go, I don't need to know this?
not directly. I feel like I've been, you know how like sometimes there are, groups, right?
Yeah.
You're like at some get together, right? And then there's just that one person that's just going off about like airing everything. They're just like, I'm gonna go into the other room because I don't think this is something that I should be be hearing right now. Like whether it's drama, like a family drama, or just and like again to give a benefit of the doubt, or just to kind of empathize with the other side, right? Like maybe they don't know or realize that what they're doing is not the best way to go about it, or maybe they think that's their only opportunity to kind of open up and vent. But um,
How about this one? So a bunch of my friends are married. Okay, I'm probably like the only single one left. And so when we're there in our group setting and everyone's there, they're sharing things that should only be shared between a husband and a wife. And I'm like, I really don't need to hear this right now. We've got virgin ears here, right? I always would say that, but I'm like, because there's also kids around, and even though the kids aren't saying anything, they're hearing stuff, because then they'd ask me later, Auntie, what were they talking about? I'm like, no, that's nothing you should know. And so, but I think it's because we're just so comfortable with each other that, when they talk about the relationships as husband and wife, and I'm like, yeah, that needs to stay in the bedroom. You guys don't need to share that with everybody, right?
You know what? I've experienced the same thing where, yes, a lot of my friends are married as well. And when they start talking about things and you sit there and go, okay, it's time for me to exit the conversation. I don't want to hear it. Don't need to hear this. So I slowly, and then they start changing the subject, of course, because, sometimes they forget, they get carried away, especially when something happens, or they start complaining about their spouses.
And I don't know, also, I don't know if it's a cultural thing, but usually like the older folks, the older Filipino folks, where they're just really blunt about things. And sometimes they'll just talk about things like, oh yeah, me and my husband. And I'm like, no, we don't need to know. Because first of all, your grandma already, that's not something you should be sharing. But, they're like so proud of it. And I'm like, I don't know if this is something I want to hear.
Or they try to up it. Hindi, ako, yung asawa ko ganito.
Yeah.
It's like, my husband's like this. No, my wife is like this. And I said, no, we don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. So we'll just slowly, again, exit the conversation. So, but how do you guys feel about someone who loves to dominate the conversation?
ooh,
It all depends. If I'm tired and I don't feel like talking, I don't care. They could talk all they want as long as they're interesting, right? But if they're talking about stuff that's boring, I'm like, oh, wait, hold on, I'm getting a call. Let me talk to you later.
So have you stopped a conversation or even tried to avoid the conversation, whether it's the first time or a second time with the same person, just because they either just love to talk or overshare every little thing?
Yeah, I tell them my phone's on silent, but I'm getting a call, so let me get back to you later. Yeah, because and a lot of times they'll see my phone light up because, like, a lot of times it is on silent, but that is something I will do. So if we're all talking and I'm like, I gotta go, guys, you know what I'm doing?
You're like, hello, and it didn't ring. I gotta go. I got a phone call. That's a good one. I like that one. I think I'll use it next time. How about you, Tony?
Have I been on the are you talking about the dominating person?
Yeah.
Um yes, but again, I feel like there's always okay, let me qualify my statement with this because I'm typically a person that just in a group setting, I will be mostly silent because I like to listen and observe everyone. So if there has ever been a time that someone has dominated or or overshared, I feel like I didn't do anything about it, or maybe I didn't even notice. I feel like it's harder to tell with closer relationships because with it when it comes to like the example that we gave earlier, like with family or with people who are like sharing stuff with you, I feel like sometimes those people are not even necessarily the people that you're close to, where you just feel that it's uncomfortable. But when it's between friends and you reach this certain level of closeness with them, you know that you can share some certain things. But then it gets kind of a little bit more gray in terms of what you would really consider oversharing. And I think that's where maybe the frequency might come in, and then also just like timing, because I feel like the times with my friends where it's been like a matter of, is this oversharing or not, or like is this like dominating the conversation or not, is like maybe when we're talking about what we're going through, and like your friend is like venting all like everything that they possibly can say, but then they don't leave space for you to also share what you're going through in that sense, and they may not be doing that intentionally. Like that's not even necessarily anything that's done out of malice, but it's kind of like, it's one of those instances. So I feel like there's more nuance to it. I think just depending on what the relationship is. I feel like you can see the boundaries a little bit more with further relate with like more distant relationships. Like, oh, she's an acquaintance. Oh, that's my workmate. Like, I don't really want to be talking with my workmate about like these certain. But you might if you're close with them. Like, I'm comfortable talking about stuff. Like asking them, like, are you okay? Like, was that everything with that one issue that you talked to me about? That's just me though. I think a lot of it can be also like comfortability and what people's capacities are to kind of handle certain information, and not just information about you is one thing too. Information about sharing information about other people, that's a whole other like oversharing level. That's not okay.
And I
Yeah.
think if you're asking questions, or if you ask certain questions, that's when people tend to overshare. And so sometimes when I'm talking to people, I purposely don't ask them any questions, especially if it's not something I want to hear about. Like, like for me, I do feel bad when people have a bad day. And if they share it, that's great. But I don't want the whole conversation being about that whole bad day, because then I don't want to have a bad day. You know what I mean? So I
Mhm.
try to keep my conversations more on the positive, and then that way, at least I won't feel too tired, or I won't feel like, I won't feel bad because they're having a bad day and I'm having a great day. And how is that going to turn out? Right? Like, oh, I hate my job. I hate this. I hate this. And I'm like, oh, I love my job. You know what I'm saying? That they might not appreciate that conversation. So I think it just like, depends on the questions you ask, and
Mhm.
what you're expecting to get. Because sometimes you can just ask one person, how you doing? And all of a sudden they're going to give you their whole life story, and I'm like, okay, I didn't need to hear that.
Expectations, yeah, like framing the conversation and like going in. That's kind of one of the ways I feel like can kind of help um with the oversharing.
Yeah,
Like
now that
maybe,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Sorry, go
Oh,
ahead.
no, it's fine. Now we've talked about most of it is us receiving it or the receiver when it comes to the conversation. Now, if in case we're not able to escape, I'm just wondering, what do you guys do with information that, let's say, they overshared and we don't need to know that information? What do you guys do with that information? Let's say it's really personal and you know the person that they're actually referring to, whether they're just acquaintance or a friend or a relative. Do you share
um no,
information
i'm
person?
i'm getting old that I tend to forget a lot of stuff, which is good, because sometimes when people share stuff and I don't need to know it, because sometimes you will be tempted to share. Why are they telling you if they want to keep it a secret? If they're telling you, is because they want it. And so for me, I'm glad that I forget stuff, because people tell me stuff like, remember I told you? And I'm like, yeah, no, I don't remember. No, because like I said, if it's something about me and I share it with somebody, then that means I'm okay for it to get out, right? But if you're sharing something about somebody else, I think that's a different story, you know?
Yeah, I agree. So, oh, Tony, go ahead. You were going to say something.
No, I was thinking, because the question was what we do with the information. I feel like it just depends, because if it's really personal and there's no need for like intervention in terms of like safety reasons, I feel like if that's their information, that's their information. And maybe they did, because I feel like sometimes people, when people overshare too, that maybe they don't even realize that they're sharing that level of detail until much later on upon reflection, and they're like, oh no, I don't think I should have shared that with so and so, like they just asked me how I'm doing. But it's not our right to kind of go around and sharing things people confide in us, because that could be what the moment is too, like they're just confiding in us.
Mhm.
But again, that's not a straight black and white situation. There's sometimes where safety could be a concern, or other things, so you would
And
have
and
to read the situation.
and that's why I'm careful with when I'm talking to people and asking them questions, because I have had friends who confided stuff in me that I'm like, yeah, you should not be telling me this, because sometimes they tell you things that's going to make you change your perspective of how you see them, right? Because like, ooh, I would never have thought that you would do something like that, that kind of stuff. And even though we're still friends, like I said, I look at them differently sometimes, or sometimes they tell me information that I really do not need to know. And there's no way of unknowing it because it already came out. And so, like I said, I'm just glad I'm starting to forget things. So it doesn't bother me as much.
I do my best to forget it. I am forgetful sometimes, but like what Tony said, unless it has to deal with somebody's safety or life, then yes, I think it would be best to intervene, or maybe help out, or talk to the person. But other than that, of course, we do our best to just mind our own business. If it's not pertaining to me, I let it in and I let it out. Now, how about in the workplace? What do you think is oversharing when it comes to people in the workplace? See, I've had my share of encounter where it was my first day at work and all I heard was just negative after negative things and complaints after complaints. And I was told to watch out for people as, you know, mentioned on the like names on their list. And I'm like, is this how I'm supposed to be? Is this how my day is gonna go? It's my first day, for crying out loud. So I just ignored that person. I was with her for a few days for a training, and after that I'm so glad that they switched it with someone else who was a little bit more positive, who was more outgoing and actually more mindful of her words when it came to other people's business in the workplace. How about you guys? Have any experiences at work where either people overshare, or what do you think about those kinds of people?
I'm that person. No, because I mean, but I don't do it in a bad way. Like, let's say, I was entrusted to show you the ropes and to train you, right? Because not everyone at work is nice. There are really some people who are mean, and there are some I've experienced where they like to backstab people, where in front of them they're just like the nicest people, but yet when they turn around, they're just gonna say all this bad stuff about them, right? And so if I like the person I'm training, and if they're really nice people, I try to kind of warn them, and not, and I just say, hey, be careful around this person. And then, I don't share specifics. I just said, hey, sometimes in front of you, they'll be really nice, but when, you're not in front of them, they're going to be mean. And, but I'm not the only one who does that. There's other people in the office who say the same thing. So it's not just me. But I just like to do that because the worst thing is, because when I first started, nobody warned me about these folks. And it happened, in front of me, they're so nice, but because where the office is, it's like open space. Everyone's got their own cubicle. You can hear their conversations, and they think that, I'm old, that I'm deaf. I'm not that deaf yet, and you can hear things. And so I would have appreciated it if someone had done that to me when I started. And so for that, I think that's okay. Now, if you're just gonna say bad things about people, that's not true, or something horrible, then I don't think that's fine. But to warn people, I think that's okay. But that's just me.
I do understand how it's phrased and explain the whole thing. Now it makes sense. But the problem with her was because of her tone. I think it's because the way she relayed or conveyed those complaints and the warnings and whatsoever with some of our coworkers, it made me kind of tone deaf. So I was like, I don't know if I really want to listen to her, because I didn't connect with her at first, but I did end up observing the ones that she mentioned. So of course, as the days go by, months, now years, I said, okay, now I understand what she was referring to. Now I understand what she was talking about. So yes, it makes sense. And yes, it is also good to know to have the advance warning when it comes to the people that we need to watch out for, because not everybody can be kind. And yes, there will be people who will, especially if they don't like you, do whatever it takes to either ruin your reputation or, say also bad things about you behind your backs. And I have also experienced that in the past. How about you, Tony? Any thoughts, insights?
I haven't experienced that in the workplace. I think I'm I'm fortunate in that sense that nobody has shared in a way that is uncomfortable. Because I think that's where the oversharing for me, I kind of gauge it, is like my comfortability with the information that I'm receiving. Typically when people come to me to talk to me about things, I'm open, and I feel like people can feel that, and maybe that's why they feel comfortable sharing things with me. And I don't I don't pay too much mind to that. I'm okay with receiving information for the most part. But um I guess one thing to proactively do in an environment that's supposed to be professional, right? Because I feel like it's one thing to have a one-on-one thing, but then also I'm really big on the public forum type of behavior where people will just do like they'll call somebody out, and it's not just a, you can tell there's a personal thing attached to it. You know what I mean? Where it's kind of like it's somebody that's trying to point out something that's work related, but you know that it's not work. You can kind of feel the vibe that there's more to the words that they're saying. And that's kind of where I'm at in terms of that stuff. I feel like individually, personal is a personal thing. I'm okay receiving information as it comes, because in my mind sometimes it's like maybe that person doesn't have somebody that they can open up to like that. They don't have like a close friend, and like I'm okay with taking it. But that's me, because that's my capacity that I'm willingly taking on, also by asking questions that I do. Because again, I ask I ask questions. But when it comes to moments of where you need to be professional, and there's a certain standard that you kind of have to keep up with. It's like if you're working on a project, I don't think this is the appropriate time to talk about your grievances with XYZ, or subtly inserting your issues with so and so, with especially with everybody else. It's like, is that really necessary? Like thinking the intention there, like what is the intention for sharing this information? I feel like that's what I always go back to is intention. Because if your intention is to, incite hurt, or to cause like some kind of division, or to like what Arnie was saying, like getting people, to not like ruining reputation, like that's not cool. Like, yeah, I feel like that's the stuff where it becomes a line of, you have to have that discernment of, and be okay with telling people, be comfortable telling people like, hey, I don't think you should have shared that in the meeting. I feel like that was below the belt. like being able to tell people that. Oh,
Yeah, some are brave, just uttering words with no filter. That's for sure. We've had meetings where everyone just stays quiet the minute the boss says, "Okay, enough is enough. We don't need to hear anymore." No, and like what you said, Tony, in that one, that becomes quick with, "Okay, let's just have a one-on-one conversation." No, not everybody has to, be part of this conversation. So what about us? Do we tend to overshare? Have you ever experienced oversharing any information, Arnie and Tony?
Yeah, you've heard me overshare every time we chat on chat line, right? Your guys don't ask me like, oh, do you want a relationship? I just throw it out there. Blue eye, blonde hair. That's oversharing, I think, right? Maybe that's not something everyone needs to know. But no, like I said, I try to figure out who I'm talking to. If it's somebody I'm close to, then I think that's where I will share more things. But if it's someone I don't know, or if it's just an acquaintance, I tend to watch what I say sometimes if I catch myself, because one, I don't want to offend anybody. If I offend people, that means I just really don't care. But I try not to offend people. And the other thing is, you know, there's certain things in life that I don't want everyone to know about, like only certain people know about. I mean, like there's things that my parents don't even know that goes on with my life that my best friends would know. So it just depends on what you're sharing and who you're sharing with. So
Mhm.
but yeah.
I definitely agree, but yes, you're absolutely right. We have to be, again, mindful with what we share, especially online in front of the camera, right? That's why we call it chat line.
You
We're
know what?
chatting away.
Renz put something in the chat that I totally agree with, because it's what I do. He says when when they're conversing with me over shares, I start looking down. I kind of do that too. But not down. Sometimes I'll look away. Like if it's something I don't want to be talking about, I'm like, what somebody calling me, because it's, and I'm hoping they get the message, right? But I thought I was the only one who did that, but I guess others do the same thing.
But what I do is when somebody's just start rambling, like just nonstop, it doesn't matter what it is. I'm just like, yeah, yeah. But my mind is somewhere else. I'm thinking of what to cook for dinner. I'm thinking of what errands to run next. And then at the end of the conversation, they'll ask, "Hey, did you listen to everything I said?" I'm like, yeah, I think I got it. But if that person were to ask, "Can you summarize what I just told you?" then I'm in trouble. Now, since we've been talking about oversharing, how about to avoid oversharing? What do you think we should do in order to avoid oversharing, especially when it comes to our personal lives, in order not to, try not to offend others or hurt others, or even our lives being exposed too much? What can we do about it?
I think when you're having a conversation with someone, you need to look at their body language, because if you can see that they're starting to feel uncomfortable, then maybe that's when you're oversharing. Or if you can, like that, if you're talking to Karen's and he looks down, then that's how you know you're oversharing. So you need to stop, right? But you have to look at their body language and see how they're responding, because they could also be bored. Maybe they don't want to hear what you're talking about. So even though technically it's not oversharing, but you're talking too much. You know what I mean? And it's something that does not interest them. So I think those are some things that you can do. And like I said, if you don't want people to overshare with you, then quit asking them questions, because the more questions you ask, the more they're going to answer, right? So you can't blame them if you're asking the question.
Tony's laughing over
That's
there.
me.
Tony.
That's literally me. And that's why I don't mind it. I feel like I've never been on the receiving end of oversharing, because I just ask questions, because I'm just genuinely curious. I'm just genuinely curious about people and what they go through, and that helps me just by seeing perspectives. But in terms of, like, I am also an oversharer to a certain degree. It might not be in the way that you expect, just because I feel like a certain level of relationship, that is kind of why I mentioned earlier, it depends on your audience, because there's some people that I feel comfortable sharing things with, but on the other end, thinking back, I have to ask myself, but were they okay receiving that information? So one thing that I'm trying to learn to do is to frame conversations, or to kind of set that expectation, especially when I'm sharing something, because typically when I share, it's not verbally. I have a hard time sharing stuff in person, just because um I don't deal with the thoughts well in person. So I like to write them out, because writing, I feel like, is my strong suit. That's how I can organize my thoughts, and I feel more comfortable with that. Now, what I tend to do with my oversharing is that I'll preface the top of the message like, you do not have to read this if you don't want to, or there's heavy content in this message. You can choose to disregard. Because yeah, it's the way of being fair to others, because I think that's for me, at least, what I've observed in oversharing. The reason why it can be so jarring is because people don't expect that. They're not, and then that's why I'm okay with it, because I expect them to share with me the details, because I asked it in the first place. But if people are not asking you for that information, and you're voluntarily like giving them that, you have to kind of think in your mind, is it okay for them to know this information? Is this the person that needs to know this information? Intention. It always goes back to intention of, why are you sharing that information with that person, and is that the right person to be receiving that information, and is that person even ready to receive that information, because they could be having their own crap day themselves, and then you just unload everything on them. Like, if you're, again, preface it, if you're having a bad day, you don't have to listen to me right now. Like, even with like voice messages, my friends, like, don't listen to this if you're having a crappy day, because it might make it worse for you. This is at your own risk. Disclaimer. Disclaimers are your friends. So yeah, and then that's with any conversation. That could be personal, that could be professional. It's always good to kind of find, the framing is not the word that I want to. There's a different word. There's a better word, but I can't think of it. Like, set them up properly. Like, set the expectation on the onset if you do feel like you need to unload or you need to vent, so they
And
know what they're getting
yeah.
into.
And Alyssa did put something on the chat. She said to avoid oversharing, I stopped talking. And that's true. If
Yeah.
you feel like you're saying stuff you shouldn't be saying, just shut your mouth. Like, don't let anything else come out. Because sometimes you'll catch yourself, right? That you shouldn't be saying stuff. And so that's good advice.
That's funny that she said that, because I do the same thing, and then I would catch myself and I start pausing, and then the longer the pause, and everybody looks at me, are you okay? Something wrong? Oh, we want to hear more. Keep going. I'm like, no, I think I've said more than enough. And I'm guilty of that sometimes. I said, oops. And, I'm thinking in my head, wow, Melvie, you just literally overshared, overloaded everybody, and look at all of their faces. Because, you can tell, like what Arnie said earlier, the verbal cues, their feet starts to go the other direction, and then the body starts to also go in that direction. And sometimes they won't say it because they don't want to be rude. But if and when that happens, and you read everybody's, like cues and whatnot in the room or within the group setting, especially, you'll know right away who doesn't want to hear it anymore. And then you catch yourself and say, okay, I need to be more careful next time and be more aware.
Self-awareness.
But you both tackled it. That's our show, everybody.
But what's funny though is sometimes when I'm talking to people and they start to overshare and it's juicy, I tend to ask them more questions so that
Of
they'll
course.
share even more, right?
Of course you are.
Of course you do.
I'm not surprised. I think all
You're-
of us are guilty.
I'm not telling them to share. They're the ones giving the information. So guess what? I'm going to ask for more details, right?
And that's how we get people talking. Like with Tony, ask more questions, and with Arnie, tell me more.
And you know what's funny? Like Ren says, to avoid oversharing, he stuffs his mouth with food. But that could be dangerous because then I'm going to gain too much weight if I do that.
That's funny. I have seen people do that where they start talking, right? And then they start all of a sudden gossiping. And then one would just start getting all the food, especially in social settings or parties. And they're like, yeah. And then they're like, and one of them said, wait, what? What is it? Especially if it's juicy, right? So they're like, wait, say it. No, finish your food. I want to hear it. I want to hear the whole thing. They're like, no, it's done. That's it. It's over. Oh my goodness. I'm having so much fun having this discussion, and listeners and viewers out there, thank you so much for all of your comments. And we hope that if this is your first time tuning in to Chatline, that you'll give us a thumbs up. Don't forget. And also click that notification bell so you'll never ever miss all of our episodes, and share our link as well, because here on Chatline, we always have conversations that matter. Now, before we close, because we do have a few more minutes left, Tony and Arnie, any last words or any more comments or insights you'd like to share to our audience here when it comes
Can I
to?
read Oliver's comment
Oh
there in
yeah,
the live
go
chat?
ahead and read some comments.
He said, I feel in all kinds of conversation, you should always be mindful of other person's time, comfort in the combo, also mindful of what we are saying as well. I feel like that wraps up the whole show just because, like, mindfulness, self awareness, self
Yes.
control.
Yep.
That's it. That's really it.
Yeah, because the last thing you want to do is when you're having conversations with people is make them feel uncomfortable. And sometimes people are not comfortable to tell you that they're uncomfortable. You know what I'm saying? They're just going to sit there and not say anything. Because I used to be like that. When I would be uncomfortable in conversations, I wouldn't say anything because then I thought it was rude. But now I will say, yeah, that's TMI. And as long as you just say that, then we're hoping they get the clue. So, yeah.
Any last thoughts? Or have we overshared enough for tonight?
You know what? What's never bad to overshare is our links for Chatline.
Yes.
Never bad to overshare. So continue to overshare.
Yeah, my friends might disagree with you on that. I like to do spam on everyone's stuff, and they're probably like gonna unfriend me because I keep doing it.
Yeah, let's overshare all of our links, social media, in the workplace, where else?
And I think another thing that's not bad to overshare is like positivity.
Yeah.
I've what I try to do is when I see someone or I meet someone, I always try to find something nice to say because sometimes they like to hear those things. So I think if it's something that's positive, then that's not oversharing. I think oversharing has more of a negative connotation. And so with that, being able to share positivity, I think that's very helpful.
Which includes also our faith. Our faith in everything that we do. That for sure, there's no such thing as oversharing, right? When we talk about our own personal experiences, especially when it comes to our faith. Well, I guess that wraps it all up. That's all we have for you tonight. And remember that your words matter, and it does, yes, it does create a ripple effect. So be mindful, be self-aware, and act accordingly. We hope that you enjoyed our episode tonight, and we will see you again next week, only here on Chatline, where we have conversations that matter. Remember, we're here every Friday night at 8 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. Take care, everyone. Good night and have a wonderful weekend. See you next week. Bye.